Hello to my listeners, and welcome to today's episode of Attachment Theory in Action. We have a wonderful conversation that is going to take place, and a wonderful guest that is going to be joining us. Today, I am welcoming Ranae Van Roekel. And Ranae is the founder of Connecting to Cope, a platform that helps people heal from trauma and build emotional resilience through connection and self-advocacy. Renee actually served 36 months in federal prison, and she turned her experience into a mission to empower others to manage stress, heal from pain, break cycles of shame. And now she speaks and teaches on trauma-informed justice, mental health, and the power of empathy in healing and leadership. Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Renee. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Kirsty. I'm so excited to talk to you and your listeners today.
Yeah, this is going to be a really good conversation, and you've had some very unique experiences, and I think that it's going to be really beneficial for our listeners, and they're going to find it very insightful. And I always talk about how these conversations just leave me with my wheels turning, just more reflection, more questions, more just thinking about things beyond my little world that I live in. So thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. And that being said, I always like to start my podcast with the same kind of question. We talk about attachment, and attachment is something that develops from very early on in life, but for you, tell us a little bit about, was there anything in your early life experiences, or when you were younger, or even earlier on in your adulthood that has kind of led you down the path that you're on today and to the work that you're doing today? Tell us a bit about your story.
Sure, Kirsty. I guess I have so many things that have, led me to where I am today. And for your listeners, and, with attachment theory and with different things that go with that, I have so many things that I didn't take care of, and
Mm.
so many things that tended to be traumatic in my life. I had a huge experience when I was 11, something that, really changed me and really molded me to who I was, and I didn't take care of it. And that was a sexual assault. And so that's something that I know in my life led me to where I am today and trying to help others with trauma. But also other things in my life happened. I had a family, my family dynamic was different than some. I am the youngest of four daughters, by about 13 to 14 years.
Mm.
And my father was a very dominant figure in my life. He was in World War II and also suffered from PTSD. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. And I just know that you kind of walked around on tiptoes and with kit and handled them with kit gloves. But now knowing what I know and doing what I do, I know that he also suffered PTSD from being in a world war, which I cannot even imagine the trauma that that would bring forward in someone's life. Um,
Mhm.
Also, my mom did the same. It's just like I said, handling things with kit gloves and walking around with, um, basically catering to his needs and his needs only. I just thought that that's how our family was. But looking back now, I know that that is something that really molded who I was as well. And very difficult situation to be in, and didn't realize it was difficult at the time. But now looking back and seeing that, I know it was. And then when I was in my preteens, I suffered a sexual assault at the hands of some boys that lived in my community. The community I grew up in was very tiny, Kirsty. I mean, everybody knew everybody. Your parents usually knew what you were doing before you got home. It was one of those kind of situations. I know that's hard for people to realize in a bigger city, but we had like 500 people where I grew up.
Mhm.
There was 19 people in my graduating class. So truly, everybody did know everybody, and you knew who to trust and who not to trust, right? Or you thought so anyway. And the three boys were older than me, but I had known them my whole lives, and I made a choice to go with them, and thus the assault ensued. And so yeah, that's a little bit about me. Like I say, if I'm in a family, three sisters. My mom and dad had been married for quite a while when I came along, and my mom was almost 42, and my dad was about 55 to 56 when I was born. So
Okay.
older parents as well. I don't know if that
Um,
answered any of your questions, but there I am. So,
it's a starting point to your story, and I first of all thank you for sharing that with me and our listeners. And I know that we had talked prior to this and kind of gotten to become acquainted, and it's I you had mentioned that you were at peace with where you are now, and I always want to make sure that we're also honoring your experience, that this is a
yep.
part of you, this is something that has made you and molded you, and so yeah, I always want to just take a moment just to honor that experience.
Well, and Kirsty, it's not that it was always easy for me to talk about. I didn't talk about my sexual assault for over 30 years.
Mm,
So I kept it all inside me. And actually, a little bit longer or bigger part of my story is the main perpetrator ended up marrying a member of my family.
mm,
So, and it's just something we didn't talk about. My mom said, back in the 70s, when something happened to a woman, and I do not think this is so, and I want to clarify this very loud and clear, but a lot of times the woman was blamed more than the man. And so my
mhm,
mom said, when this happened and I came home from my experience, she said, let's not ever talk about this because they will think you are bad and
mm,
not your perpetrator. And then that perpetrator ended up marrying into my family. So you can imagine how family gatherings were. Disassociation was a huge part of my life at that point because a lot of times I felt like I was watching our family gathering from above. I just kind of removed myself from the situation. And my mom wasn't telling me those things to hurt me when she told me just to let it go. She was doing it to protect me. And I know that now. And through therapy and different things, I've really gained the knowledge that that was her way of saving me, not her way of punishing me in any way. And
mhm.
it's easier for me to talk about it now that I have come to terms and come to peace and knowing that that act in my life was not my fault. And by talking about it, I hope to help others. And that's why I do it.
That is that is so powerful what you've just shared, and that you have been able to come to a place where you really understood that your mother was really doing the best she can with what she had at that
Yep.
time, that it wasn't a malicious intent, to hurt you, but as you said, to protect you. And I mean, I really commend you on reaching that. That's, a really deep and big thing to achieve.
Oh, it is. And I'm not going to say that some days it doesn't still creep into my head.
Hmm.
I mean, I wish I could tell all your learners out there that I'm healed. I don't have to do the work anymore and everything is great. But well, my life is pretty great, but it still creeps in and I still have to go to therapy. I still have to do the work. And sometimes my therapy is talking to others and sharing my story and
Hmm.
hoping that their trauma doesn't lead to what mine did. Um, and not taking care of it. So I really like to tell people and really like to encourage them that if they can find someone they trust and someone they can talk to start the work, that they move on. Because of what happened to me and because of what my mother said, because of all the different experiences in my life, what I did is became a people pleaser. And, we all know that that's not a good thing to be, right? You put
Hmm.
yourself in the background and you worry about others way more than you worry about yourself. And really, that's what led me to one of the biggest choices in my life, which was a very poor choice. And that was a choice to get involved in illegal activity. Even though at the time I didn't know it was illegal, I figured it out. And that led me to 36 months of incarceration in a federal prison.
Mm.
And yeah, it really was, I made the choices myself, obviously, but it was because of not handling past trauma. That was a huge factor in why I made the choices that I made. And that's why I started connecting to cope, as we'll talk about a little bit later here, so that other people have the opportunity or have someone to help them find someone to talk to so that they, hopefully don't make the same choices I did.
Would you say that that kind of people-pleasing behavior, and maybe you said this, and for me to clarify, that that people-pleasing behavior kind of led into the illegal activities, like that was
Oh,
something that was driving it?
Oh, most certainly. Um, that people-pleasing behavior just kept growing and growing and growing. Um,
Hmm.
I'm also married. I've been married for 38 years, and I'm lucky to have a great husband and two wonderful sons. And they were around for all of that. And I wanted to please them. I wanted to give them what they wanted. I wanted to look better to other people for them, and I know that now. And also for myself, because in my head I still felt I was that bad girl. That word
Uh-huh.
bad is something that really stuck with me. And so if I was pleasing others and giving them what they wanted, then I did not feel as bad. And I know
Mm.
now that those were two things that were, totally, yeah, totally not good, I guess, is in lack of a better term, totally bad. I don't like to use that word anymore. But it really was. Yeah, it just led me down a path that I am not proud of, but I am proud of doing the work that I've done to try to get myself, better and to help others. So
Hmm.
that's where I am.
Tell us a little bit about that, um, maybe a little bit about your experience of being incarcerated, and then tell us a bit about kind of the turning points in that process where, you were starting to maybe realize where this behavior had come from and how to maybe start to heal from that.
Yeah, and being incarcerated is a tough row to hoe. I mean, there's no other way to put it. But for me, it was the first time I ever only truly had to worry about myself. When
Hmm.
you're incarcerated, there is no one else to worry about you. I mean, I know your people on the outside do worry about you, um, but it was the first time I had the opportunity to look at myself and try to figure out why I made the choices that I made. It was the first time I could look at myself and say, what do I need to do to get rid of the beliefs that I have in my head? Why are these beliefs in my head? I mean, are they true? Are they not true? And people pleasing was pretty much non existent at that point because I was
Hmm.
just trying to survive on a daily basis. It was the first time I could look at myself in the mirror and say, who are you and what did you do? And life in prison is it's a flee or it's a flight or fight kind of situation in many different ways, not only because of an actual fight or actual physical
Hmm.
contact, but also for your own mental well-being. And I had a gal in prison. She was our psychiatrist, psychologist. She had a double doctorate, actually, and she had worked in the FBI previous to coming to prison. And I was lucky enough to get assigned her, or I found out later actually that she asked for me after reading my different profiles of coming into prison. And I came in the first day and she asked me a few questions and she basically looked at me and said, okay, well, we can do this your way or we can do this my way. And if you don't, want to share with me what you have to and do the work, I mean, she used some other choice words, but you are going to be wasting my time. So you can get
Hmm.
out here and you can decide that you want to get better. So when you get out of prison, that you are a better person for your family, for yourself, for your community. Or, I can assign you to a different psychiatrist where they will just let you come in and sit and twiddle your thumbs for a half an hour to 45 minutes every day. And she said, so you can get up now and leave and you can decide and come back and tell me tomorrow, and or maybe 2 days down the road. It was either tomorrow or the next day. And I thought, boy, she was rather harsh with me, if she's going to help me with my mental well-being. But she also could read from me immediately that I did need someone to be tough.
Hmm.
I could either put on the facade that I had lived behind since I was basically 11 years old, or I could do the work and become who I really was. And she was my turning point. Prison was my turning point because that's about as low as you can go. And then she said, okay, you're at your bottom. Let's figure this out. And um, yeah, she was my savior. And to this day, we are acquaintances and friends. And when I have a tough day, I still go to her. So we did some, all different kinds of therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy, emotional interviewing. And she started me on EMDR, which,
Hmm.
yeah, just great forms of therapy for any kind of attachment, mental, dysfunction, whatever you're facing. So,
Absolutely. I want to come back to something that you said because in the work that I do with our organization, it really rings true. So you said, I needed somebody to be tough with me. And so in the work that we do, we talk a lot about structure and nurture and it being this balance, right? So when children grow up, they need somebody who is able to balance structure and nurture. And if we have too much of one, then it can be unhelpful and vice versa. And and they need people who see them, right? Who can really see the child. And when you talk about your early life experiences and how your mother was very much this kind of people pleaser herself,
yep,
and it almost sounds a little bit like it was nurture, right? She was very, very high nurture. She wanted to protect you. Um, and so, but there wasn't really the structure side of it, the piece that said, hey, this isn't right. We need to do something about it. It was, I love you and it's going to be okay. And
yep,
maybe we move along, right? And so I just find it's just very validating to hear that somebody was able to say, I'm here to take charge, right? We're going to get you fixed. I care about you, but we're going to get you fixed and get you out of here. If you want to join me on this road, we've got this.
yep, yep. You know, and something you just said, that's what Katerina said to me too. And later, she also used words that you just used, is basically, I see you. I see who
Mhm.
you are behind that mask, and you are a good person. And,
Mhm.
I always like to tell people, you are not the worst thing you ever did. That's just a part of the culmination of everything who makes you who you are, right?
Mhm.
And my mother was definitely a people pleaser. She was definitely, if everything was, good in the house, she was good. She never wanted any, combativeness. Um, my dad, was physical with my mom a few times and physical with my older sisters, never with me. But he also just, I was his little girl, but he never enforced anything either. So I
Mhm.
really think that that is what I was looking for, especially after everything that happened to me. I felt that I needed someone to tell me, okay, you can in your head rely on what happened to you forever and have a little bit of a pity party. And not that that's bad, because if something happens to you, we can mourn that, mourn the life
Mhm.
or go through everything. And we all know that and get through that grief process. But we also need to move on.
Mhm.
And that is what Katerina really did for me. She saw me and she also said, I can give you the tools to do this and we can sit here and talk forever, but you are the person at the end of the day who needs to do the work. And
Mhm.
that really changed my life in telling me that, you are responsible for you and you are responsible for this work and you are responsible for the good and the bad in your life. So let's get to work basically.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. I, my brain keeps going to the word shame. That was really what was maybe created inside of you through your mother's actions. Again, not ill-intentionally, there was no ill intention or maliciousness on her part, but unfortunately, that was the sense that had been created in you that I'm bad and I should be ashamed versus the perpetrator's feeling that way. And it's such a, I mean, it really does. It carved out that life path for you, carrying that with you all that time.
Oh, most certainly. We talk about shame and guilt and shame and regret and, the differences in all those three things, right?
Hmm.
But if you just take the culmination of that and, quit trying to define the words individually so we can find a happy place, it really is that you feel that what happened was part of your fault, and that
Hmm.
if other people found out what happened to you, they would also think less of you. Thus, the
Hmm.
people pleasing. I mean, I was brought up in it, and then something like that happens. And so, if you can mask what you're ashamed of by pleasing people, what do you think will happen? You are
Hmm.
going to continue to do those things. And in my head, I was always bad. So, if I could put this mask on and make people quote unquote like me and give them some sort of pleasure in their life, that was just a good thing. And that started, I think, even, the people pleasing started even before the act of violence in my life, with my dad. If I could be happy, the happy child, the quiet child, then I was pleasing him and was not disrupting anything. Um,
Hmm.
my mom, yeah, she was probably more pleasing me than me pleasing her in a lot of the actions, but it is also what, nature nurture, as we say, that's the nurturing part, and that's what is a learned behavior. So
Right. Yeah, you took on what you saw her doing. And so, that's what you learned was the right way to be. This is how we do things. Um, an interesting question and thought I have. You mentioned that your dad was in World War II, and you also mentioned that your sisters, correct, or your
yep.
youngest of four daughters, were a bit older than you, and so I'm just curious about, and you may not know the answer to this, but was what was life like for your older sisters, perhaps? Like, was there a difference? I'm not very good with my timing, so I'm trying to think about when World War II ended and when.
That would have been in the 40s. And my sisters were born in the 50s and early 60s. Oh, no,
Okay,
the 50s. They were all born in the 50s. And then I was born in 1967. So there it
okay.
ages me a little bit. But they were born actually, in the early to mid 50s. So they
Mhm.
grew up in the 60s and 70s.
So my assumption would be that they probably had a fairly similar experience to you with the within your family, within the caregiving system, perhaps, of your mother and father.
I think it was a little different because I've talked to them about that. So after
Okay.
I went through what I was going through and trying to heal and working on healing, I asked them what it was like. And they
Mhm.
said that our mother was a lot busier at that point, obviously. She did have a job outside the home and they ran a cafe.
Okay.
So there was that mentality. And then to make our family dynamic even more complicated, my second oldest sister got pregnant at the same time my mom was. She was only
Oh, okay.
16, so I had a niece that was born shortly after me. And so we were more like siblings than my siblings were like my siblings, if that um,
Mm-hmm.
makes any sense. And I could even make it more complicated, but we'll be talking for hours, so we'll just move on. But really, they always said that my mom was always the peacekeeper, and she would do whatever it needed to do to make it a
Mm-hmm.
peaceful household. And my dad always was the boss, basically. Um,
Mm-hmm.
don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out if you don't like what is going on here. This is not a democracy; it's my house. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I ran my
Well,
house totally different. My house was a democracy. So there you go.
well, and I wonder too about, if your sisters also maybe had each other to support
Yes.
each other during some of that experience, whereas you maybe didn't have so much of that too. So,
Yeah, my two oldest sisters are like a year apart. And then my other sister came about 2 or 3 years later. So they were all super close in age. And then here I came. And
Hmm.
yeah, they were gone. The two oldest ones were gone. The oldest one had moved on, and my second sister, like I say, got pregnant, and then her husband was in Vietnam. And so they moved to the East Coast. And so the sister closest to me in age was still around while I was growing up, but she was also in high school. So it was not like we were super close. We're close now. We have a great relationship. I'm very, very proud and very lucky to have her in my life. And then she has a daughter who's actually 12 years younger than me, and we're close. So, it's just the whole family dynamic that's a little different than some families have. So,
Well, I think what it highlights, especially in the attachment field and even the trauma field, is that you cannot compare people's experiences, right? Like there are other individuals out there who've also experienced sexual assault,
yep,
experiences similar to yours, who whose path may go very differently to
yep.
yours. And just by having this very small conversation, you have identified there are all of these different variables, all of these different dynamics that happened in your situation. And so, as professionals, we have to be so careful that we are not comparing people's experiences. Um,
Or how
and
they're handled by those people.
mhm, absolutely, absolutely. And so I think that that's a really important point that you've brought up for sure.
And I think, in dealing, with the attachment and then with the trauma that, I suffered, um, we all find different coping skills. I'm going to
Hmm.
use the word coping skills here. And we all find different self care methods that get us through the times that we are trying to get through, correct? A
Hmm.
lot of mine were very unhealthy. And
Hmm.
I think that's what I try to do now is if I can help someone find a healthy coping skill to get through a rough time in their healing journey, in their therapy journey, wherever they are, or if they're not even there yet and they can't go there, then let's find something healthy that you can depend on until you are ready to go and talk to a professional. I
Hmm.
am, I am a peer. I am a peer advocate, and the people that I talk to, I make that very clear. And when I talk about trauma in front of people, I do not have any educational background in therapy. It is simply what I have personally been through, some coaching certifications, which have helped because they help in the coping skills and in the self-care avenue and getting you through things. But if it wasn't for the person that basically said, I see you, and
Hmm.
you are going to have to do the work to do this, and if you want to do it, great. If not, go move on down the road so you can pull the wool over someone else's eyes. I would still probably be back where I was. Probably different after I got out of incarceration, but I always tell people that really the day I walked out of prison when my husband picked me up, I wasn't only free from incarceration, I was free from my past. And I knew I still had to work on it. And I knew that I still had to continue with therapy. And I knew that it was not it's still going to be an easy path forward, but I knew I had my basis and I knew I basically had the road down. I just had to keep walking on it and keep moving forward.
Hmm.
And that's the kind of, you know, message that I want to give to people, that it's a continual battle. I'm not going to tell you it's going to be easy. I'm not going to tell you that healing is, an easy way, whether you're a young child or whether you're older, but that it is doable. And
Hmm.
with people like you and, even people, peer advocates like me, there's people to hold your hand along the way and move forward. So, yeah.
Well, so tell us a little bit about connecting to cope and kind of when you decided to find or found this what you've created. Tell us about it.
Sure, sure. So during some of my toughest days in prison, I tried to make a deal, I don't know who all of your listeners believe in. I'm a Christian, so I believe in God.
Hmm.
But I made a deal with him, which we're not supposed to do, right? But I said, if you get me through this, if you stand by my side, I will stand by your side. And I will do everything I can to help people that are in the same situation I was in before I went forward. And that's kind of the deal I made in my head, right? I didn't announce it to anybody, I made it to myself. And so I started thinking, what can I do? And this idea was put in my head of starting Connecting to Cope. I didn't know what I was going to name it, but I knew that there was a way that I could help survivors, and help people who had been through trauma or going through trauma, help them not go down the same path that I went down. And so that's kind of where it was born from. And I got out of prison and I knew that I was going to get a dog. So here's a whole nother story. I knew I was going to get a dog. In fact, I told my husband, I'm getting a dog. I don't know what kind it is, but his name is going to be Cope. And he's like, oh, I love that name. And it's really different. I said, yep, because I need coping skills to move forward with my healing journey. And so do other people. And people can identify with coping, right? Whether it's good, bad, otherwise, we can all identify. And so I got home and I started searching for Cope. It was during COVID, so I was home anyway. And we found him. And he is like the best boy.
Hmm.
And that is where the name Connecting to Cope came from because I really connected to Cope. He is one of my biggest coping skills. And I will tell anyone out there that using an animal, if you are able to, as a coping skill, as a sounding board, I would tell you Cope never judges me, but that would be a lie because I get the side eye quite often. But he is also the most understanding and loves me unconditionally. So
Hmm.
that is where Connecting to Cope came from. And it has just grown into talking to people about what we talked about today, sometimes more in depth, sometimes down a totally different path,
Hmm.
um, and helping people with trauma, coaching people with, with different types of trauma, things that have happened to them. And that's where we are today with Connecting to Cope.
Well, I can't lie, I love a good dog story, so that
Yes,
is a
yes, and he is
wonderful
the best.
story.
Yes.
Um, but you know what you said though is he gives you unconditional love, and I have not done enough research into it, but in my opinion, that is one of the biggest pieces of attachment, of secure attachment. It's this unconditional, you show up however you show up, and I'm going to love you. I may
Yep.
not always agree with you, or I may not always support a decision that you've made, but I will always love you for who you are, and I
Yep.
will help you, and that really is something that animals do, right? Because they don't talk, they can't speak to us, um, and they always show up. And so I'm a firm believer in the support of an animal if it's a good fit for somebody.
Well, I agree with that totally. I did some work with service animals while I was in prison actually. And the unconditional love that they gave people while they were there, a lot of the gals. So when I started in prison, I started in a facility in Waseca, Minnesota, and there was tons of women in there who actually were in for life. Um, and they were a big part of that dog program. And they knew that even though those dogs came and went, while they were their unconditional friends. They stayed with
Mm,
them constantly. And so you do see that. And so much of the attachment theory and the different things that we're talking about here, the traumatic effects, did affect the women that were in there, for whatever reasons. And
hmm.
so now looking back at that and doing some of the studies of how much I think healthier, I'm going to say healthier, they are while incarcerated because of their bond with these animals is amazing. And so that's a
Hmm.
whole nother topic and a whole nother thing we could probably talk about for hours. So, but it is great. And I love what you're doing, in figuring out the attachment theory, the attachment part of trauma and part of what makes us or what makes us who we are when we're adults,
Hmm.
trying to get to the
Hmm.
bottom of that. So I could have had
Well,
someone like you when I was a kid and I may not have taken the road I took. So
well, and this was something that we had kind of thought that we might chat about, and I want to be very mindful and careful about how we talk about this, but we mentioned, that you grew up kind of learning this people pleasing behavior was the right way to go. And so there's a piece of me that wonders if your your view on how to relate with people, if that had been different, maybe you might have had a different experience with these boys that you took that walk with. And maybe you may have felt a different way and being able to walk away or say no or all of those things you may have done, and we're not going to go into that right here. And I don't want to dismiss or um, take anything away from your experience.
Oh, you're not.
Um,
You're not. It's just so good to analyze.
it is, and tell me what your thoughts are.
And I've thought about that many times, Kirsty, going through healing, examining the different parts of my life. Because I thought truly when I started this that a lot of my choices were led totally because of what happened to me when I was 11. Like because I didn't remember a lot of my life before I was 11. So
Hmm.
my brain kind
Hmm.
of really just shut off at that point, 10, 11, right in there, those preteen years. And so my brain just kind of shut off and I did not remember much that happened before then. But digging deeper and doing some emotional interviewing, using the EMDR system, we went back further because the therapist that I had kind of was thinking along where you were. And I believe my early attachments and the early infiltration of, my parents' roles in our family and my sister's roles in my life and my, everything there has a lot to do with the choices that I made as well.
Hmm.
That I was just unfortunate or fortunate, however we want to look. I try to look more back at things now that they're all fortunate pieces of our life, right? Um, was just another bump in the road and another, reason that I chose to be the person that I became before I tried to get healthy. And
Hmm.
that person is still very much a part of me today. And I still go back to people pleasing. Like I say, I wish I could tell you that I never do that. That is, ingrained in me. That's my nurture and nature some days, I think. But it is difficult to deal with. And um to know that it wasn't just that, but it was also, upbringing and the way my brain handled that. So what do you think about that? What
I think that the way that you are addressing it, like it's still a part of me, right?
Yep,
We can't change what has been and gone. And so we have to figure out that path forward.
yep,
That's why I love Dick Schwartz's work about, no bad parts and the parts work, that it's not about just pushing that piece of you away and pretending it doesn't exist. It's saying, this is a part of me. This is how it shows up. I can either choose to make it a strength of mine, or I can let it control me and become a hindrance or something unhealthy. And I am making it sound like it's something easy, and it's not easy to do
no,
that by any means. It's a lot of intention, a lot of repetition of showing up differently and doing things differently. But I think sometimes we fall into a trap of thinking that we don't have a choice and that we are defined by our past, when actually there is some semblance of choice there. There is some control to say that I know this about me and this is how I'm going to let it rule in my life.
yep. And saying what you just said, and defining how that part of you is going to be a part of your life. I use something called rational self-analysis. I use them
Okay.
every day. And now I do them in about 2.3 seconds. It used to be that I had to write them all down, figure out what the bad part what was, the good part was, what part do I want to use, correct? And for people out there who don't understand that, it's basically taking a situation. You have a choice to make. And maybe it's a choice you can think about ahead of time, right? So you can choose, what feelings you will have, what your reaction to the reaction to the situation that you have to decide about. Then you decide your feelings, and then you decide the outcome. And I used to only think about others in that outcome. I did not care what my part of it was. I cared about what others' parts were. And that isn't me anymore. Um, it still will flicker in there a lot. And I still like to have other people happy with me, but I understand in my life that that is not going to happen all the time. So, an RSA going through my head, what's going to happen if I choose this path or that path? What's the outcome? What are my feelings? That is something that I live my life with. So, that's like you say, you let your strengths and your weaknesses be part of your life, but
Hmm.
you decide what the outcome is going to be if you let them rule you. And that's kind of what I try to do now. I still think I'm a people pleaser. I know I am, but I try to um, not let it rule my life, that I'm
Hmm.
the only person who can control me. So that's where I'm at.
That, and I mean, just again, I commend you so much for getting to this place in your life and being able to use what you have experienced and learned to support other people. Healing is it never ends. We're always healing, and
Yep.
if we're not healing, we're always learning, which I feel is a part of healing. But I think for you to be able to share that lived experience with others who don't have maybe a sense of hope at that point in their life, and you are there being able to bring that hope to them and being that person who says, I see you and I'm not going to let you fail, much like your friend did for you.
Yes, most certainly. Yeah, I appreciate her to this day. And she always says quit, but it's true. I mean, it's not like, everything I've done since is not a direct result of what she does, but it is a direct result of my starting my healing journey. And that was because of her. So I just found someone I connected with. So,
Well, and if I might add, I feel that she became your secure attachment figure.
yep,
Really and truly, that she, in that when you were incarcerated in that system, she was your security. She was your
yep,
attachment figure. And then maybe you then were able to come out and transfer that to others. Like, I don't have to please you all the time. I can just turn up and be me, and that's good enough.
yep. Even on my bad days, she still stood behind me. And, that's a great person to have in your court. And like I say, I think you're right. I think she is definitely, if not still, the one of my secure attachments. She definitely is. So.
Well, Renee, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I know that my listeners are going to really enjoy listening to this episode. And we will put some links in the show notes so that they can find out about connecting to cope and, share that with other people that they feel might benefit from it. So thank you so much.
Well, that would be wonderful. And thank you so much for letting me talk to your listeners today and for the conversation with you, Kirsty.